Okay, hello. So I'm just hitting record. Sorry if there's background noise. I got family here visiting, my parents, aunt and uncle, so they're gonna be chatty. Might be a little detectable. Okay, so I really wanted to talk about this though, because I was just looking at this. So here yesterday, last night, I was looking at this region in general, specifically starting here, but then more generally, trying to get a bearing on what's going on. That led me over to this region where I noticed, because I was looking at this center, this this Nova Center here that has many rings around it, and I felt like this structure was significant, so I just kind of was like, where is this anyway? 107.66, 44.6, 44.63, 107.66, I think it's mine, something like that. Not sure if I put that in as it was. I mean, close enough. Okay. Where is it? Why did it not show up? Not there. No, that's not it. It's over here. It's like right here. Yeah. I don't know why that took me over there. Sometimes this was working last night. It seemed to be. Okay, so anyway, it's here. I found last night that that's here. This structure here is closely related to this structure, I believe, caused by, which is at the center here. And I've been recently. Maybe I can just pull up some images. What do I call it? Why is it not showing up here? Here we go. Yeah, that one. Like, how do I find that folder with all my stuff in it? It's not just immediately visible like it usually is. Okay. I'll just go to the terrain. It's probably better just looking at the terrain. So, for instance, I mention a sort of anode separator cathode aspect where there's dendrite features that branch from in this way and like energetically deposit overlay India in essence. This dendritic mountainous terrain. It's dendritic into India, and it's inverse dendritic into the Tibetan plateau, where it starts from a single channel and branches outward into the Tibetan plateau, but then it starts from a single mountain and branches out to many mountains from the northern side, in a way where this is effectively an anode separator cathode, and that's not the only place where, like, when the storm is discharging, let's just give her, it's just too much information overlaying it. When the storm is discharging, this behaves as like a positive no terminal of the earth itself, the totality of the earth, where the sphere of the globe, if it is a sphere, pardon me, flat earth, I'm still open, but this node is like the earth's like terminal, and because it's relative to a singular like portion of the earth, it makes that portion the anode relative to the cathode with a separator. So there's a flow of the basalt from the cathode to the anode, but there's a flow of the storms, ethereal energy that initially flows in to puncture the mantle, but once it does, it moves over here, and so it's in the anode section behaving as like it's a storm relative to the earth. It's basically it's an electron that was temporarily on the earth surface of the earth, behaving as an electron relative to the earth itself, which is not so electron-like. It's actually like a huge electron that's a storm, that's a vortex that's putting in just subtle energies into the earth, that it's drawing from space because it's creating a vortex high enough that the totality of the atoms above the storm are opened, and space itself just swells in like a river, flows through the column of the storm and into it, and to a point where it punctures it, and then it moves it over here, and then it's still doing that, but it's doing it through the anode of Sarastra underneath the separator of the Kutch region here and into Thandarkar, I think it's called. Pardon me, I don't know what this region is. Tharparkar. 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 Okay. So it is an anode and a cathode. And that's not the only place here is an anode and cathode, where this region and this region behave as like one and the other. I think this one in that instance is behaving as the I wanted to say anode, but it seems more like it's on the cathode side, but it may be still like, even though Sarastra is an anode relative to the Earth as a whole, it is a cathode relative to the Kutch region, especially across here, so that it basically has a exchange here where there's a vortex, essentially because the storm is here putting a current here, and there's an exchange here. It's creating a vortex that just swirls in the region and creates a shallogram shape by the vortex of currents. And then over here, there's a current. This one actually is better with the images, like this one, because essentially the current came down this way and then it branched in two directions. In this direction, it created a mound, a hill called Alec Hills, or hills called Alec Hills. And then over in this direction, it created a depression. Like counter to it. So essentially, like, this is a cathode relative to an anode over here with a separator. And then in a similar way, this is a anode relative to the cathode here, I think, with a separator region between them, maybe, although these two seem to be more like energetically equivalents, but where this is maybe more one system in some manner in terms of how it interacts with one another. Like it may not interact in the same anode cathode kind of way. This also maybe, I don't know. I probably am not fully thinking of them all, but the critical elements to remember though is this dendrite feature where it branches. It like a lightning strike. It goes from the storm cloud to the earth, discharges into the earth, so it starts from a single like source location and then threads out into branching to effectively transmit the energy in a dendritic type of way. So the reason I found that of interest enough to look over there is because this appears to be where the storm, this mound, this like somewhat unique looking mound that's relatively at the center of this overall structure it is here. And I noticed also here is this stream coming seemingly across here in a manner where it kind of, when it reaches it, it starts to have like tendrils that overlay this exactly here. Not randomly located, but exactly at that node. Like it's like a like a short circuit is occurring maybe or something between the two nodes, because essentially over here, here's Yellowstone. Here's that node. Here's that node. And here's Yellowstone here. But if we look here, there's also rings here, suggestive of that there's another nova center that is essentially here. And if we look here, there, and it really like comes up to the region of this and kind of stops in that region here. Maybe even like flat right there, because we see this weird straightening there going on, maybe also there. And then down to here though, and then back to a more rounded state, or even down to here and more rounded. In a way where there's basically, if we if we zoom out on this current created not just a single node, but two nodes adjacent to one another with a sort of separation here. And I looked at this is not, I was wondering, like, is that this region? And actually the separator region is more over here, I believe it was. Or not quite, but let me see. Let's see right here. 109, 40, 45, 110. That's probably pretty good enough. Good enough. Like around here. Basically where these dendrites apparently also overlay here, because they're, this region where Yellowstone is definitely like less. So it's almost like right here is like the center of this eruption center. And we can even see in a hexagon here around it, just like Gurnar. Maybe it goes up here a bit. Hard to say exactly. But very similar to Gurnar, also similar to Gurnar in that there is a like inlet, even maybe two inlets. This is very similar to Gurnar. Let's go to I'm not, I need to organize. This is not what I'm looking for, but it's good enough. Where there's a current coming in right up here, right here. This is an inlet initially. The reason this is there, these are here, is because this was shaped by currents like coming inward with channels that they especially flowed inward using, and then they dendritically branched out at the end in a similar way to like overlay the node energetically connecting, bonding the system with whatever exactly it's bonding with. But it has an inlet here, but it also has an inlet generally this way across from the flame. This region, that when the storm is here, it discharges across here and just pushes a boundary of material in the basalt, just in the basaltic flows. It doesn't actually cause substantial elevation differences. It just causes a detectable, like observable feature that is a boundary because it went this way and pushed the boundary around it. And then it discharged physically through a flame-like structure that forms at the end of it through the boundary into this region and just discharges into Gurnar. While there's currents wrapping around it and all these things I've talked about in other places, I don't want to get too much onto it, but at the same time, since this topic is making it relevant, it maybe is good to talk about it in more depth than maybe I would otherwise. Let's see if I can find some more. This generally. So the storm went this way, and once it got here, created these chakras. These are basically anode cathode. And then went here. Okay. Before I get too distracted, let's just go back to where we were. Or actually, yeah, let's just go back. I was thinking if there's another good example to bring up in the Himalayas. But so it's almost like this node, which is Yellowstone, right? Yeah, this node. This void region is actually caused by the, maybe here. Where is that? 112.77. 110. Okay, 110.4. That's right, it's here. This is the node of Yellowstone. The node under Bighorn Basin, and interestingly, this node is hot liquid material. Seemingly is like pulled here, so it's not detectable in the magnetic anomaly map, but here maybe it's solidified, like it got compacted enough to create a mound that actually is detectable. So that it's almost like an electron to a nucleus that is in a certain orbital shell. Or something of that nature, or maybe not an electron to a nucleus, but like a different type of system that's chemically bonded, at least. Like maybe two different atoms kind of represented, where one of them is the Bighorn forest here, this region. Specifically, like the epicenter-ish of it being here, which is then overlaid by this energetic connection. But then that also has a larger, if we look, it has a larger ring here that goes around like here. So it kind of creates like this larger ring plays perhaps into that there's this river cut almost like an equilibrium boundary between the two systems. Maybe the Yellowstone is just more massive, so it overwhelms, because this is very dense and compacted, so that like where this is very heated and spaced out material, so that it's more liquid. So it's just not as like as compacted. It's more fluid and liquid, probably because of just the sheer amount of subtle energy there that is heat, but it's stably formed like a core of a subtle energy there that makes the rock type materials become very dispersed, relatively spaced, so that it's more spaciously made of a thing, where so that the boundary is further over. Whereas this one's so densely packed that it doesn't really resist any pushing in down towards its boundary because it's dense. So the whatever's going on under Yellowstone heat-wise can kind of expand out to a large enough radius where maybe it kind of similar to this, how it has a boundary here that doesn't reach this separator like river. That's almost like down the middle of the two. In a similar way, the Yellowstone as a whole, if we kind of look at it, like maybe it also like here kind of reaches like to here in reality. And so this stretch right here is sort of like where the separator lies with well, to here, because this is really overlaying this unit. Which also appears to maybe have an outer ring further still. Like there's this one too. So then there's this side of it where they don't just like reach each other. They reach into each other's fields. So Yellowstone has specifically a ring that reaches into the ring here. This ring reaching in. I believe that's basically leading to this. This is at 108.07. So it pretty much just goes right up to it even. Is this, even though it's visible here, it goes out to here. That probably is a part of it here. It's maybe not so visible over here, but over here, out to here. And then maybe down here. But then coming over to this is pretty much exactly where then the unit itself is overlaid with the separator material of this, like, whatever this is exactly and why this is this region, energetically why it formed. I'm not sure about the topography. I think it's lower. And it's just like reaching on top of. So like there's this thing there, and then it goes up to it and kind of just overlays as much as it can by ramping up it and branching out. To create this kind of thing. Okay. I should probably participate in family endeavors right now. Definitely a hexagon here, and definitely reminiscent of Gurnar. That's right, I was talking about Gurnar. There's also an inlet. It looks like it may extend all the way out here just because there's this channel coming through here that weaves its way to the core, basically. Um, also I noticed here, this region, it kind of, like these, they're kind of like earlobes up here. That's crazy. It's almost like a wolf, maybe. Wolves. Wolf ears, at least. Maybe not so much face. Looks like a derpy fox face. Derpy fox face. But I was thinking maybe these are like bubbling outward of the ring. Like the ring structure kind of went to a certain extent, but then the energy was generally caused to bubble out portions of the extent that created these two features over here. Although this one is not resembling this one, so maybe they're opposites in nature. Like one of them was made negative, one was made positive, so this has like uplifts in it, this has depressions in it. I'm not sure if this is made to be like a lower elevation, so this is almost like an anode cathode separator with connections between them energetically, probably as well, more directly. Like that tends to happen where like something is two things are made out of one by making one a positive, one a negative, one a uplift, one a depression. Whew. This looks like a mirror. So again, here's a positive, here's a negative, positive. This feature, same feature ish. Highly likely to be like a quasar kind of feature where there's like the more dense material in this instance, I guess, was left behind here while energy propagated over here and just carved like an imprint of the negative of the feature to then cause the elevation of the terrain to be depressed. So this is like a positive and a negative, positive, negative. This even is reminiscent of here. Let's see without my drawing on it. This little stretch. And it's just porous here in general. We even see another ring here that's perhaps related, in fact, to the Bighorn Basin energetically, like a propagation of the energy. When this region novaed, this region novaed in this direction, maybe it just imprinted like the currents as they flowed past the mounds over here, for whatever reason, were like caused to swirl energetically at specific locations to create an imprint of the opposite effect up here. It seems like it, honestly. And so if that's the case, it's possible that this is also caused by the first nova of Yellowstone region here, kind of imprinting a negative over here. I don't know. Like, does this feature make sense off of like something like this? I don't know. But this one looks very much like this region, to a point where I'd I'd say we should consider their relationship. Let's see, what is this? Lake Superior. Very recent. Very recent, which would make sense if it happened after the novas over here sent like a negative opposite over here. We can kind of see the center there, right there, ringed by another. And this portion that's ringed out here probably. So maybe like, let's find where this is. This is 49.8, 88.5. It's over here, actually. Okay. So there is actually what maybe that Nova Center imprint. This has happened in other cases like Yellowstone, like the Mariana Trench, where we see essentially what's happening here is there's a current cutting above, along the North Atlantic Ridge that's opening as this is happening. It goes west under Europe, and then it goes north along a new fracture line to basically wrap around this segment at the Arctic. And it wraps around here, but what it also does is it causes a nova here that really probably contributes to causing this boundary to be broken in the crust that was pre-existing. And so this current begins to flow across here, this whole stretch, this whole width, across Mariana Trench. And it runs into an opposing current that's coming from the over here underneath Mexico into Australia, which is hitting it here. So where it hits Australia, it goes partly into it underneath it, but it also just deflects around the coastline. And so the energy initially this Mariana Trench segment is not formed. This is after the expansion starts to happen. So then the current that's flowing across collides with these currents, which are generally filling this region, which then pushes in the hexagon boundary here, which is common that there's a feature of that nature in structures that I've looked around. But so what appears to have happened is initially it left behind an imprint that looks a lot like Florida here. A very similar one when the currents were flowing across this way. But as the earth expanded, the currents like jumped to be flowing instead here, and then more up into this segment right here, which then ballooned out, creating the Mariana Trench region. And so, why was I talking about that? So there's probably things like that going on when this current's cutting across this way. I guess where it's colliding with resistance, it just then leaves behind like a general imprint of some energy. So like resistance of the Appalachians kind of like causes the currents underneath here to only be able to go so far. Maybe they also literally go all the way out here. They might actually go out here and have participated in moving Flemish Cap over here. I'm not sure. This looks very porous. Let's see when these formed. Based on what we're interpreting before I look at it, it should be plausibly this region. Let's see. That's up here. Plausibly, this all occurred in a more recent time by just energies propagating across that then under the surface just removed, like by heat, removed materials that then kind of caused the upper layers to collapse in shapes that are because of how the lower layers were removed, specifically in like nova type centers. So like here's the Hudson Bay. It doesn't, let's see. So it's possible, but it's not necessarily the case. It's possible that these currents came across and caused these features, but it's also possible, like all of them pretty much, so that most of them are more recent in time, but it's also possible they were pre-Cambrian and pre-existing features that were just present, like this one maybe. So let's see, based on that, if it happened after all of this, then it should be in the more recent times, like 20 million, let's say. So let's see. Okay, this is way past there. This is actually 290. It may be because this region up here is more related to this, which is like this Siberian traps under this nova where the current came across to the Mariana Trench region to cause the Mariana Trench. There's a nova up here. It's coming across here pretty much, which is where the Siberian traps are. Here's another one of those features that are very like X type shapes as well, where there's like a system that is probably energetically behaving as like a anode or cathode relative to maybe some adjacent system right here. Like this looks like a system too that's energetically maybe like Bighorn Basin, where Siberian traps are like Yellowstone equivalent, where they then have like a separator region that has actual like across this dividing them lines and then like connecting them lines. And so when this occurred, maybe I haven't really considered, I think for sure these were occurring up here. Let's see, because I know there's ones like here. And so this is probably Permian, because Siberian traps is Permian. Siberian traps. Okay, 251. So that's really interesting because this is prior. I would hypothesize, based on what I was just saying, that it would be after Siberian traps, but before all this other stuff, if it were to be related to this. But it may be also like currents cutting across between. I have not at all thought about this path, or even considered if it is a path, like enough to be like, okay, and then the current also flowed up through here and it had effects over here where Maybe it caused novas. Like that looks like a nova center. Where's that? 75 minus 75, 60, 64, let's say. Which way? This way? Here? Maybe. So if that one's related to the underlying surface, this is too. It is too. It's just how that one. It does appear like the current may have came in this way then, generally to reach this region, because it must have separated North America and Greenland. Although that may be considered part of North America, besides the point, mainland. Not even sure. It must be part of North America, technically. It separated Canada and Greenland to flow down between them there. Let's see. Like this way. And then flowing in this region for sure. But maybe also through there. Where was that one? That one was distinguishable. Right there. Or there it is. There it is. What's this? There. So maybe a current kind of gets in here through this region. And so it's maybe it's running this way into the current that's generally coming this way. It also could be that, like, even though the Siberian Traps, this nova occurred at like 251, that the current generally, even though this nova center was caused to occur later, that the current was generally still flowing here, through here, and like over, like this way, into this region. And so, like, cutting across this way, wow, there's a current cutting across this way, so there's like colliding currents generally in like northern Canada. That actually probably is what's going on, and then they kind of reconverge up here around north of Greenland. The one coming in this way cuts over around Greenland, and then the other current just kind of has a wall that it builds. Like, some of it goes that way, but it immediately is in the current over here that's generally going this way. So it just gets brought that way. But then it joins the current over here, so there's probably a current generally cutting in as it can. It looks very shaped in this way, almost like this current cutting across was like creating a wall that way, deflecting this one to kind of straighten out and go up that way. In a manner where the current coming across this way had maybe a channel that it could flow. and then it just kind of was pushed in because it was being pushed in by this and started kind of flowing across like that. Just generally shaping this region, and then just anywhere there were maybe more extensive cross currents, they led to major features, plausibly. Let's see when Hudson Bay was formed. How old is it geologically? At most, is filled with minor amount terrestrial Cretaceous Cambrian strata. During the majority of the Cambrian period, this basin did not exist. Rather, this part of the Canadian Shield area was still topographically high and emergent. So maybe this was like the nucleus of Canada that degraded and left behind a void, but now the new nucleus of Canada is maybe like this chunk or something. I don't know if it has a nucleus in the same way as Australia distinctly does, and Africa, like here, all under Australia. Australia is like centered. The platform of Australia is like centered on this thing, and Africa had a nucleus. So they probably all had some form of nucleus that underwent transition, and maybe the Hudson Bay region was that nucleus that was essentially, because it's the nucleus, when there's currents flowing along the surface that the nucleus rests on, it pushes that surface downward and causes essentially those currents to tend towards that nucleus. So they flow into it enough to then really like change it materially and create a new nucleus out of the system. Yeah, okay. I'm not sure if that's exactly what happened with Hudson Bay, but I'm just trying to get a bearing by going through this. Okay. Field of Ordovician. So very, very early on in Cambrian. So it was early. Okay. So that strongly suggests that the current cut across here, maybe first, like before really feeding down this way, before going along the African coastline of North America. It instead preferentially went right to the core of Hudson Bay and just deteriorated the region enough, like caused novas to like distribute the mass outward so that it created boundaries that reduced the capacity for the current to flow through the region and just reshaped it enough to be stable enough that the currents were reduced and preferentially then caused to flow down this way. Let's see if that makes sense with the Appalachian Mountains orogenies. 325 to 260. So if the Hudson Bay was in the Devonian period, like early on, like immediately when this current started flowing under the surface, it went just right across from Dwarka, across here under Europe, right across all the way to the Canadian nucleus, and just fed energy into it initially. And then it caused some like nova events here. Extinction of events 5 major. Maybe this one then is caused by the that Permian Triassic is caused by the Siberian Traps nova, the nova that occurred over here. And that string of events, really, maybe. This nova that broke through here. So when it broke, the current broke underneath the crust, it started to cause another extinction event, I guess. And started to nova and cause major eruptions, because this was a nova type event that was just dramatic. And so this one probably, I wouldn't be surprised if that's tied to the creation of the Hudson Bay, because the nucleus of Canada was degraded by this inflowing current that caused the underlayers to nova, occurring first though. So it's so rewritten by Yellowstone region flows that crossed over into it, like it punctured the pre-existing boundary. Maybe here Hudson Bay is all the way up here. So if we imagine that the Hudson Bay was rung by a nucleus right here like this, maybe is still the nucleus that was just deteriorated, like the flow came in, wrapped around, creating like a big yin yang again type of structure, where this is the positive, this is the negative, where the core itself was separated, but it still has like the outer shell of it pretty well and intact, maybe. But like, it still doesn't quite have the exact shape that it necessarily had. It does look pretty well, like it does have a lot of the shape though. Like these novas over here really only extend to here mostly, and then it's kind of just flows over that way. So maybe they just more so only reached to here and like flowed into this region, but there was already this nucleus's like degradation created a stable boundary that maybe was out to here. And then because this current was flowing atop it, it kind of created like a galactic ring. To the like disk of a galaxy kind of structure that has a yin yang center. That's kind of, it itself is kind of resting on a pushing downward like a mass. Even sideways though, in a way, along this plane of the galactic disk, maybe. But then the currents flowing across it, atop it, definitely this was the nucleus, and the currents from across here definitely flowed atop it, and were able to get into the nucleus's shell enough to kind of degrade it a bit. Here, this section, because there's this, how these form, it appears like they tend to have gaps, spaces where current flows around them as they're shaped, and so it got into that gap energetically and just opened it and widened out this region here. So probably there's like orogenies and things that are earlier on, but after Hudson Bay over here in this region that are more developed, at least at that time frame. And then really the current coming down here just straight goes down to the edge until it can come in here at some point. When the Earth expands, it's finally able to actually interact beyond this boundary that was here. This maybe was there, but this down here, the boundary even further over probably, that appears to be totally gone, but maybe it was here. Or here. Where the current flows all within the region that's now filled with materials. So that would kind of explain why this is so old, the Clearwater Lakes. Because it's related to currents that flowed under Canada at the time of the earlier part of the current flows before they went this way. So let's go back to what I was initially noticing before I forget that this has that shape of this. So Hudson Bay, the nucleus of the region, was up here. That yin yang was up here. That then had a like range of a band coming out of the side. Let's see. Where's this turn at? 105, minus 105, 57.5. What was I looking for? 57.3 and 108.7 is where. It's over here. So that's a little further that way. Okay. So maybe there's something coming this way here. It cuts across like that and goes down there. It's really not evident in the terrain. Does this have any overlying like features, maybe branching from the Hudson Bay? Not really. So let's see, when did this form? Like all of the Great Lakes. Lake Michigan Formation Age. Lakes formation began. $1.2 billion years ago. And sat with no water in the meantime. How did they establish that it separated that long ago? Although Lake Michigan is one of the places where there's like, what is this called? Uperlite. Under UV. How cool is that? Uperlite. Oh my god. I need to heal. Oh my god, I need to heal. How do I heal? By not doing this, pretty much. I'd like to get compensation for doing this so that I could, like, deal with myself and fucking heal. Not be some fucking slave to even be able to heal. Like, I gotta go be a slave to heal. Okay. It's not like I did it, like, didn't do all this stuff, though. Thanks, society. You guys are fucking stupendous and logical and reasonable society. Okay, this chunk does look like that. I'm just kind of looking here in the meantime while I'm talking. Like it's maybe related to that. I don't know why. It would almost seem like it would, if it is related, it would be like related maybe to that portion. It does have like features at similar positions and similar shapes to the general region, coupled with this, coupled with the Bighorn Basin node here that also looks there. Thunder Bay. Thunder Bay. I'm not sure if that's that. Lake Nipigon. Created by repeated and preferential erosion of relatively flat-lying and faulted Proterozoic sedimentary strata by repeated Pleistocene glaciations, which is recent. Interesting. So let's go back. This lake perhaps is not related to this process, but this has an imprint that's much more recent. That's over here of Lake Superior and Lake Nipigon. That's did form relatively in the similar time frames to when all the stuff going on in here was happening, but afterwards, where like the energy propagated over here while radiometric dating painted the picture of time passing sufficiently to make it appear as if like millions of years passed, but it was really rapid, but enough time passed where that amount of time was the amount of time that the radiometric dating painted the picture of. So essentially then forming this subsequently while this is earlier. Let's see if this lake is also like a billion. Da, da, da. Formation. I need MA, something geological dating wise. I'm not talking about like when the water was deposited, like That makes me wonder if there's things at the bottom of Hudson Bay that are like weird Atlantean things. Like they had us, maybe they were at Flemish Cap, but they were also maybe in northern Canada, especially in that region where it's real cold, real covered in glaciers and things that were just real covered in water. That's not, who wants to go searching in that water? To the point where we really don't even know what's in there, maybe? Let's see. Geology. Here we go. This should be older if it's. Billion million. Surrounding Lake Superior is Precambrian with rocks. So this is where that energetic flow. That's Lake Superior. The lakes formed by glacial erosion. No, they didn't. Maybe they filled by water receding into it from glaciers. Geological features that formed predetermine the shapes. Here we go, here we go. Lakes formed at the terminus of the Laurentian tide ice sheet during the final phase. So basically, yeah, they formed when Yellowstone supernovaed. The nova here sent energy over here, which then caused the region to melt underneath the ground to a point where it caused a depression in the shape of the energetic propagation that then also probably played into the actual melting of the glacier, the overlying like rock water that was freezing now because the earth was there was water there that the earth was releasing across the region, but that essentially, or maybe it was already there, some fresh lake only, fresh body ocean only, freshwater ocean with no salt water at all on the earth maybe, and it just froze over here in this region when the earth kind of shifted around and caused surface water to freeze in regions where it didn't previously while the earth was expanding, generally speaking. But then when the Yellowstone energy propagated that way, or whatever exactly, where's that caused this, like, here's this mouth thing here is down here, which appears to stem really from more so Bighorn Basin from this Nova Center. Although it may also just be related to the current generally flowing across. It appears like some of the current is wrapping along a boundary pressure wall, hugging the wall, and then like ramping off of the wall over this way and cutting across the current that's traveling this way. And so they create the Yellowstone Nova Center here, or here. One of those are along the whole thing even generally. And then also the current cutting across above Yellowstone collides with it over here, creating another one. But then the current just keeps going and balloons this region. But some reason it just imprints it over there. I don't know exactly why. It's almost like a let me quasar. It's probably in here. Q. Harp, maybe? Alton Harp, I mean. Here's a host galaxy that has a quasar that it emitted, and then it left behind an imprint of the quasar in just a different frequency. In this instance, the quasar is the more massive and went further, but in this instance, it appears to be it was more energetic, more mass over here, so that the surface is still elevated, whereas over here the energy was more subtle and maybe more dense in its subtlety, more quantity, maybe in a way where it maybe does represent a quasar, where this represents like the gas cloud leading into the quasar. This here maybe is more like the breath of the scald freaking demon head thing, orc or something. I don't know. That is breathing here, and then also breathes here. An imprint. In a way where maybe this does represent like the quasar of the galaxy that emitted a quasar, and here represents the gas cloud. Okay, that's probably pretty good to just pause there for now and reflect on what just happened in my head. I feel like I'm starting just looking through this region to reason through it enough to be like, cool. Cool. And this is really coming home, if you will, to like present day. Like I've been really not approaching present day, more focused on 66 million years. Everything after that, like, I'll figure it out later, maybe, or someone else can. If people start to work with me sooner or later, then maybe someone else can just start to add these pieces that I'm not accounting for. But I mean, it looks like this is starting to really collide with like the ancient apocalypse right now, where that's a big topic of conversation that's people are talking about, is this alternative viewpoints and whether it's racist and all these things that I'm hearing words come out, or like, I don't know. But at the end of the day, until we like really account for this kind of thing, we're gonna be missing details. And it looks like one of the details is that this whole region melted and probably was frozen when the Earth started to expand. Like it shifted the state of the Earth in a way where the water here froze energetically, maybe because of the space flowing underneath it. Like subtle energies flowing into the region just like cooled it and froze the region. But then the mantle energies coming this way from the mantle puncture hole that flowed throughout the Earth, maybe were more able to cause heat due to the nova of event here. I don't know. Just spitballing why exactly. But for sure it makes sense that the heat of the nova being directed in this general direction would have melting effects on the surface level. And then generally, like, the Earth is stopping and expand. All this thought process is just stopping, and it's kind of resting in a more modern condition. Where here we are today with what has now stabilized, relatively speaking, to a great extent. Where this is really just not happening anymore. Just like the effects are just still there, and it is happening. Like Yellowstone is still alive because they're still like it's still happening. Like the energies are still there and moving around a bit and restabilizing because they haven't quite stabilized. But it's generally done doing what it's doing. Okay, with that in mind, I'll be back soon. See you then.